Welcome to a Legalbytes presentation of the Karen Reed murder trial. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel we make sense of the law one bite at a time. If you want more on the background of the Karen Reed case, check out our video on it linked in the description below. But otherwise, you be the jury. Did Karen murder her Boston PD boyfriend John O'Keefe, or is she being framed by local police who Reed says are actually responsible for O'Keefe's death? Tell us what you think. But in the process, the one rule is don't be a dingus. Remember, everyone comes from their own perspective and opinion, and everyone comes to conclusions at their own pace. Agree or disagree, but always respectfully. Okay, let's get into it. All right, you guys, welcome back. Welcome back. Afternoon in Boston for the Boston Tea Party trial, as I occasionally like to call it because of all the tea that is getting spilled, particularly of the Canton Police Department in this trial. But there's plenty of tea to go around today. The cross-examinations have been pretty intense. The last thing that we heard from Nicole Albert on cross-examination had to do with those 2 phone calls, which she says she didn't pick up for 9 seconds and 7 seconds, but I don't know. Celebrate usually doesn't lie. People do. So unless, you know, hey, maybe the prosecution is going to have an expert come in and say, look, this is where it's wrong. This is why it's inaccurate. These things happen, blah, blah, blah. Maybe there will be a reasonable explanation for it. Maybe it will be something that is actually convincing, but maybe not. I don't know. We'll find out. So far, doesn't look good for the prosecution. Neither does the fact that, you know, there's all this stuff about the dog and the, you know, in the house that just didn't come out on direct. I mean, the sale of the house, they did talk about, so they did take the sting out of that. However, cross-examination has not yet finished. And so maybe she's going to get around to the house. Maybe she's going to get around to the details of the house. The fact that it was sold for less than what they were intending to get in a very hot market. I would like to see an explanation for why that was. There are, I mean, and look, now this was one of the things that I did look into, because I said at the end of the last stream, of the morning stream, that, you know, my parents are realtors. So I grew up in a real estate house talking about this kind of stuff and having an understanding of like how these things will happen. There are massive market forces, you know, that play a huge role, of course. Macroeconomics, absolutely, all day, every day plays a huge role. However, there also are, you know, there's buyer psychology, seller psychology that comes into play. Every house is different. Location, you know, all kinds of stuff. A lot of things can come in. The fact that there was a death there, maybe the fact that there, you know, that this address is being Googled a lot because it's, you know, part of this case. Maybe every single buyer in the area knew that this house was like at the center of an ongoing criminal case. I don't know. That would be very interesting to me to find out. But $50,000 under market in a hot market, yes, of course, but $50,000 under the market sounds like a lot. It is a lot of money to a lot of people. It's you know, $50,000 is a lot of money to a lot of people. But when you consider the fact that the price of the house was like, or that I think they listed it at was $950,000, it's like a 5% difference, which is not a huge amount. It's really not a huge amount, in my opinion, having grown up around these kinds of conversations. For me, other people might disagree, but there might be other details here that are more, a little bit more suspicious, having to do with the house, and that's fine. That's fair. I'm open to any and all reasonable explanations and arguments having to do with the house. Same thing with the dog. Same thing with, you know, all of this other stuff that's been coming up that has been very, very interesting. Also, very interesting. I'll point. Just because coined a new phrase, lollygagging. I like it. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Let's use it. We're always coming up with new phrases and new terms with all of these trials, and I absolutely love it. You know, last trial it was sidebars, not snide bars, and we've got lollygagging this time. You know, what else are we going to come up with? It's a 6 to 8 week trial. We are maybe a third of the way through the trial, maybe a quarter of the way through the trial. There's still plenty of trial to go. Plenty of things can come up that we can that we can get some memes for, you know, along with those red Solo cups full of evidence. Don't go chasing lollygags. I love it. I love it. Okay. All right. We'll need a Legalbytes chat dictionary soon. That's also great. And also, yes, from the Hannah Gutierrez retrial, we got chinchillas of evidence, because the chinchillas chinchillas of evidence comes from the Depp trial. Chinchillas of elephants comes from the Hannah Gutierrez retrial. JP Eagles. Did you also walk the cats? Not needed. They walk themselves. They take care of themselves on that front. But Indy did get outside, yes, and I did manage to grab a bite to eat. I might eat a bit more of my wonderful wrap that was delivered during the stream. So apologies. I'm gonna mute myself while I eat so I don't have people hearing me noshing. I hate that feeling. So anyway, but I'm gonna try to remember to unmute myself if I have commentary on like the morning stream when I had a snack. Okay, all right, folks, let's get into it, shall we? Because this testimony has started again. We are back on to cross-examination of Miss Nicole Albert. How's it going to go? What else are we going to cover? So far, cross-examination's going well. Started off a little bit with a couple hiccups, with attorney Elizabeth Little for the defense. This is her first time really appearing in this trial. Like I said, she's appeared in quite a few of the hearings. She's gotten some experience with all of that. However, so far in the trial itself, this is my first time really seeing her perform, because I've seen snippets of the hearings, but nothing really huge in substance. So, what was I going to say? So anyway, but yeah, she seems to have been kind of warming up a little bit as this cross-examination has gone. And when it comes to like newer attorneys appearing, I always try to be a little bit more like merciful in commentary, because it's like they usually are the ones that are a little bit less experienced. They usually are the ones that are maybe even new to the case. I mean, we've seen trials where there's like a brand new attorney that shows up and replaces another attorney. That was the Hannah Gutierrez retrial, the armorer, the Rust film armorer case. That was wild. Anyway, so I try to be kind in my commentary to those folks, especially as they're like kind of warming up. Give them a chance, right? All right. Anyway, let's get to it, shall we? I already said that. Let's do it. Let's actually do it this time rather than just say we're going to do it. Okay. As usual, questions, all that kind of stuff, let me know in the chat. I'll save it. I'll answer stuff. And otherwise, all right.
All right, Ms. Little, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, before we start, Exhibit S, which was marked for identification, I believe the proper foundation is laid. I'd ask.
So let's not do that from there. Let me see it, please.
Sure.
Do we have S as in Sam, or X?
Identification.
S as in Sam?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, it wasn't today?
Why don't you come to sidebar, folks?
Okay. And we're already this is why it's good that we started with commentary, because we can just skip through a few of this. I do hope that she starts to pick up her voice a little bit. Oh, also, Divine Inhale with Donna Clifford. Yes. Also, yes. So here's this from Elborite earlier. I saved it. I meant to address it. The Twitter post saying a BPD officer bumped into and pushed KR in the hallway. Yeah, he was ejected from the courthouse for that. So it doesn't seem like there was like an actual like assault, but
Exhibit X
an unwanted
is a
touching.
graphic representation of 34 Fairview.
Yeah, not a photo.
Not a photograph.
Okay, sure. Now you can approach the witness if you. Oh, you just want to put it into evidence now?
Your Honor.
Okay. So that will be our next exhibit. Madam Court Reporter? Thank you.
We actually need it.
Also, Judge Butthead, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member.
Yes.
I don't think I said that earlier. So welcome to Bite Club. Very happy to have you here. So
Ms. Albert, you testified that Jennifer.
sorry, really quick. There were some questions. So she has what she called a graphic representation, which it sounds like that's like, oh God, are we going to see some like graphic violence? I think that what it is it's like a mock-up, probably of like maybe the interior of their house or the layout or something like that. It's going to be something along those lines. It's a true and accurate representation of something. So it's not a photo, but it's supposed to represent something else.
Gabe woke you up around 6:45 a.m., correct?
I believe I said between 6 and 6:30, but could have been
That
6.
was what woke you up, correct?
Yes,
She obviously had access to the house.
yes.
The door wasn't locked.
Nope.
That's sort of a typical practice for you.
Yeah, it was just sometimes with the kids, the last one in, supposed to lock it. They didn't, it just wasn't always locked.
And inside your house, you had plenty of blankets and other items that could have been comfort to a man laying in the snow, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor.
So as to that form, I'm going to sustain the objection. You can ask the question a different way, Ms. Little.
Ms. Albert, you had blankets inside of your house that could have helped someone who was freezing outside.
Objection.
So I'm going to sustain the objection. You can ask a shorter form of that question.
Yeah, just break it up. It's compound. That's the problem.
Ms. Albert, you had blankets in the house, correct?
There you go.
Yes.
You were also lying next to a first responder
Objection.
that morning, correct?
You can answer that.
Yes.
And neither you nor your husband came outside to help Johnny, correct?
We did not go outside because we had no idea what was going on outside. We were sound asleep until my sister came into my bedroom.
No further questions.
Okay. Stilali?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Oh, that's it. Okay, redirect.
With regard to phone calls from your sister Jennifer McCabe that morning, shortly after 6 a.m., did those phone calls wake you up?
No,
Did you answer those phone calls?
no,
Did you speak to Jennifer McCabe on the phone prior to her, or at any point on that morning prior to her coming into your room?
I did not.
And you were shown something that's a Cellbrite extraction report, correct?
Yes.
And not just that specific one, but have you ever seen any Cellbrite extraction report
Probably not.
before in your life?
No,
So fair to say you don't know how to interpret the data that's on there?
no,
Fair to say that you don't know whether or not an answered call or something that's listed as answered was something that was actually answered or went to voicemail.
correct.
Now, with regard to your dog, Chloe,
Mhm.
following that incident in May of 2022, what, if anything, did you and your husband do with regard to the person that had been bitten?
Well, we had gone over to their house to apologize for what had happened and, offered to pay any bills, that they may have had for any injury to the dog or anything. And then after that, we just decided that we thought the best thing to do would be to try to rehome it because I just didn't want something like that to happen again.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what are the steps that you took in the process of rehoming your dog?
Well, initially I had called a bunch of shelters and they were pretty much telling me that it would be hard to rehome her. She was dog aggressive
Probably.
and they would probably have to put her down. I didn't want to do that. The family, we love the dog. And so I did not want to do that. So I reached out to the woman in Texas who we got the dog from to see if she could help. And she said, she couldn't take it back, but she would try to help me out. So she ended up finding a woman who lived in Vermont. I think she lived alone. She had big property. It seemed like a good fit. She wanted to take Chloe and we made arrangements and I went and met this woman halfway and I gave her Chloe.
And what, if any, conversation?
You know, I will say I do know someone who had a dog that was a bit more of an anxious kind of dog that actually bit like a toddler. That was not great. And they ultimately had to rehome the dog. And it was not a fun experience. And they had to kind of figure out like what to do about this whole situation too. So ultimately they were also able to rehome their dog to someone else that does a lot of outdoor activities, has a bigger, bigger yard, bigger house kind of situation. It's like basically he's like an outdoor dog after that point. So her explanation with that, I do understand. It's still, the timing is still weird. It's still weird. But, you know, that explanation to me does sound somewhat reasonable. Doesn't fully resolve the issue for me.
Was a contact that you had with that woman in Vermont since rehoming your dog?
For a few months after
Objection, Your Honor.
So not the substance of it, but
Have you had contact with the woman in Vermont?
yes, I did for a few months, back and forth.
Now, with reference to Chloe, when your sister Jennifer McCabe comes into your bedroom hysterical that morning of January 29th, was Chloe in the room at the time?
Yes,
You were asked some questions about the evening or the early morning when people had come from the waterfall back to your home, correct?
mm-hmm.
And at some point, you were cleaning and Mr. Higgins and your husband were out of your line of sight, is that correct?
Yes.
How long a period of time are we talking?
I don't, it wasn't very long, a couple minutes. Wasn't watching where everybody was and what everybody was doing.
Fair to say, relatively short period of time.
Yes.
I have nothing further.
okay.
Briefly, Your Honor.
Okay. So you need to take this down, sir. Thank you. There was something that was just up there. Go ahead.
Ms. Albert, you never received any voicemails from Jennifer McCabe on January 29th, did you?
Not that I'm aware of.
You also have never produced, pursuant to our request, any documentation about the whereabouts of Chloe.
The objection sustained. I'm going to strike that question. Disregard the question. Well, questions aren't evidence, so we can leave it on the record, but the objection sustained.
You've never turned over any information about the location of Chloe
Oh,
since the pendency of this case, have you?
Objection, Your Honor, may we approach?
I'm just going to sustain the objection.
I feel like she should be able to answer that though.
Have you ever provided information about the whereabouts of Chloe to the Commonwealth in this case?
Yes, I believe I have.
You have.
I believe so.
When did you do that?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
So this might be a speculation objection, basically saying like you know, she doesn't know about the dog's whereabouts or something along those lines, or how do we know? So you know, this would be laying a foundation would be the proper way to get around it. But I don't know. I mean, the whole like, have you ever given information about her whereabouts? I feel like she should be able to answer that. Okay. Let's time travel. Yeah, Family Man Donnie, the defense team has been fighting for over 2 years for this information. I do have recollection of hearing about that. That they've been like, we're asking for it, we can't get it.
No further questions.
Oh,
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Ms. Albert, you are all set.
Thank you.
all right, who's next?
Your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth call, excuse me, Mr. Brian Albert to the stand.
Ooh, Brian Albert.
Please step up and raise your hand. You, Benjamin, do you solemnly swear the evidence you give in the court and jury in the case now hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you.
All right, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Your Honor, and good afternoon to the jury.
Good afternoon.
Sir, could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Sure, it's Brian last name Albert, Albert.
And where do you live, sir?
I live in Norwood, Massachusetts.
And how long have you lived in Norwood?
Approximately a year.
And who, if anyone, do you live in Norwood with?
My wife, Nicole, and my son, Brian, and my son, Brendan.
Actually, just a little bit about your family as far as, let me start with yourself and your wife, Nicole. How long have the two of you been married?
Approximately 29 years.
And were you together for a period of time prior to getting married?
Yes, we've known each other since we were 13, 14 years old.
And do you have any siblings, sir?
I do.
And how many siblings do you have?
I have 5 brothers and 1 sister.
And if you could, just as far as, are you the oldest?
I'm the oldest of 7, yes.
And as far
big
as your
family.
brothers and sisters are concerned, what are their names? And if you could rank them sort of by age.
Sure. The next sibling after me is my sister Kathleen. Then I have a brother Chris, a brother Kevin, a brother Keith, a brother Brendan, and a brother Timmy.
And you and your wife, Nicole, do you have children of your own?
Yes,
And how many children do you
5.
have? And how old are they?
So my oldest daughter is 29. My son Brian is 25. My son Brendan turns 23 today. And I have twins, or we have twins that are 20 years old. Caitlin's 28. I'm sorry, I said 29.
Now, prior to living at your address in Norwood, where did you live before that?
Canton, Mass.
And how long have you lived in Canton?
Approximately in the house on Fairview Road, approximately 11 years.
And in total, about how long have you been a resident in Canton before moving to Norwood?
Approximately 45 years.
And that address, that's 34 Fairview Road, is that right?
Yes.
And what, if any, relationship did that home or that residence have to your family before you and your wife and the kids moved in?
My parents had lived at that residence prior to us.
So you had spent some of your childhood in that house as well?
Yes.
And do you work, sir?
I retired now. Retired.
What did you retire
Boston Police Department.
from? And how long were you a member of the Boston Police Department?
Approximately 30 years.
And within the Boston Police Department, were you assigned to any sort of specific unit or special duties?
My last assignment, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. My last assignment was the Boston Police Fugitive Unit.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to January 28th, 2022. Do you recall that date?
Yes.
And do you recall what day of the week that was?
The 28th, I believe, was a Friday.
And when you first sort of got up on the 28th, where were you with that?
On the 28th, I was in New York City.
And why had you gone to New York?
So I went to New York for a funeral of a New York City police officer who was killed in the line of duty.
And about what time or what day did you go down to New York for that?
We went down the day before, so I believe that was Thursday.
Do you recall how it was that you got down there?
Yes, I flew to New York.
And when you say we, who, if anyone, went with you on that trip to New York for the funeral?
I flew with a friend and a coworker named Eddie Hernandez.
If he already said we, you don't need who, if anyone, joined you. Who joined you? That's it. You know that someone joined you. That someone joined him, right? Again, it's just his habit. It's his habit. It's frustrating, but it's his habit.
So another Boston police officer?
Yes.
And down in New York at that funeral, were there other members of law enforcement that you knew or were familiar with and working?
Yes, there were thousands of police officers that went to the funeral.
And included within those people, you mentioned you have a brother Kevin, is that correct?
Yes,
Is he a police officer as well?
he is.
And where is he?
He's a detective in Canton, Massachusetts.
And was he down at this funeral as well?
He was.
And do you know a gentleman by the name of Brian Higgins?
Yes.
And was Brian Higgins at this funeral service as well?
Yes, he was.
And how is it that you know Brian?
So I know Brian Higgins initially from work, a professional relationship. I've known him known of him for 10 or 15 years. And then the past few years, more recently, we worked together on a closer basis, and I became better friends with him.
And fair to say that when you became better friends with him, you also sort of socialized with him outside of work?
Yes.
Now, as far as your return trip from New York, what, if anything, happened?
On the return trip from New York, we drove back.
Why did you drive versus fly back when you flew?
So that weekend there was anticipated snowstorm, and I believe the flight that we were taking with JetBlue may have even been canceled. And Brian Higgins was leaving in a vehicle that morning. So we ended up driving, or after the funeral, we ended up driving with him.
And so it's yourself, Mr. Higgins, and then if anyone else went with you on the drive back to Massachusetts?
Eddie Hernandez and my brother Kevin.
And when you arrived back in Massachusetts, where was it sort of specifically that you went first?
I initially went to Charlestown to pick up my vehicle.
Where was your vehicle parked in Charleston?
It was at a police station, Charlestown Station. It's a satellite station located in Charlestown.
And that was in reference to proximity to the airport, is that correct?
Yes.
So that would have been Logan that you flew out of and intended to fly back into?
Logan Airport, yes.
And after you were dropped off with your vehicle, what kind of vehicle was that?
That was a Ford Edge,
Was that a personal vehicle or work vehicle?
work vehicle.
And so you get dropped back off at your work vehicle. Where did you go?
So from Charlestown, I drove back towards the Canton area, and I met Brian Higgins at a restaurant bar called the Hillside.
Is that in Canton as well?
I believe so. It's on the Canton-Milton line. I believe it sits in Canton.
And what was the purpose of you and Mr. Higgins going?
After the drive home, he asked if I wanted to get some food and stop off, and I said yes.
And if you know about what time was it that you got to the Hillside with Mr. Higgins?
I want to say around 9:30, perhaps. Not entirely sure.
When you arrived there, what did you do?
So we went into the establishment and had a drink and hung out for a while.
And did you order any food there?
I did not. I believe Brian did, though.
And while you were at the Hillside with Mr. Higgins, what, if any, communication did you receive from your wife, Nicole?
So around that time, I talked to my wife, I think more than once, and she had let me know that her and a few people were at another location in Canton, and she had asked if I wanted to come by and see them.
What was that other location?
That other location was the Waterfall.
Is that an establishment you were familiar with?
Yes,
You've been there before several times?
I had been there before, yes.
And so you drove then from the Hillside to the Waterfall?
Yes.
About how long a drive is that?
Maybe 7 minutes, between less than 10 minutes.
And so as you're going on that drive, the snow that was anticipated coming in, had that anything related to that started yet?
No, I at that time, I don't recall any snow.
And in relation to the waterfall, where did you park?
In the parking lot for the Waterfall, which is adjacent to the door to go inside. So it's to the left if you're looking at the building from Washington Street.
And when you come into, now, when you left the Hillside, Mr. Higgins stayed there?
Yes, he stayed.
And when you came into the waterfall, who, if anyone, was there?
So when I walked in and I saw my wife, my oldest daughter, Caitlin, I saw my brother, Chris, his wife, Julie, my brother-in-law, Matt, and my sister-in-law, Jen.
And your brother-in-law, Matt, and your sister-in-law, Jen, their last name is McCabe, is that right?
Yes.
And if you could just explain to the jury sort of how you were related as far as what marriage is.
So my brother Chris's wife is Julie, and then Nicole's sister is Jen, and then Jen's husband is Matt McCabe.
And is it fair to say that you've probably known Jennifer McCabe about as long as you've known your wife, Nicole?
Yeah, since she was a little kid, maybe 6, 7 years old.
And you see these people, and where are they sort of situated in the water?
So there was a high top table kind of in the front area as you walk in, kind of in the middle of the room. And everybody was just kind of around the high top table.
And what, if anything, was there as far as live entertainment at the waterfall then?
There was a band playing there.
And with reference to the people that you've just spoken, as far as your wife and your daughter specifically, were they at the high top table closer to the band or further away?
So they were on the side of the table that's, I guess, closer to the door as you come in. And then there were other people on the opposite side of the table that was closer to the bar area.
And after you came into the waterfall, went up to the group of your family, what did you order anything? What did you do?
Yeah, I kind of just said hi to everybody. I don't recall exactly, but I'm sure I ordered a drink. And then just kind of hung out with family and friends.
And following your arrival, who, if anyone else, showed up and eventually sort of joined your group?
There was another couple at the table. I don't know if they were there initially when I walked in, but there was another couple at the table whom I believed were there before I got there, but I just don't know what their names were.
Do you know how they were related to your group?
I don't. I think they're friends with Jen and Matt, but I'm not 100% sure.
And where were they situated in reference to where your wife and your daughter were?
So they were, I believe, to the right of this pretty large high top table.
So towards the other end of the table.
Yes.
And if you recall, what were you drinking at?
I don't recall. I usually drink beer, Mick Ultra, but I can't remember that night what I was drinking.
Now, following your arrival there and you meet up with your family, were there other friends or family that eventually showed up at this establishment and joined your group?
Yes.
Or you sign any contract, download the
So after I was there, maybe about a half hour, Brian Higgins arrived at the location.
And if you recall, what, if any, sort of communication did you have with Mr. Higgins, or how did Mr. Higgins know to come to the waterfall specifically?
Because while we were at the hillside, I had mentioned that I was going to be leaving to go to the waterfall to see my family who was already there. And I invited him to come by if he wanted to.
And at any point in time, sort of throughout the course of the day, yourself and Mr. Higgins, you had each other's sort of information and cell numbers, things like that?
Yes.
And at any point in time throughout the course of the day or the evening, did you have occasion to text or phone call or anything with Mr. Higgins?
Yes.
Now, after Mr. Higgins arrived, who, if anyone else, came into Waterfall and joined you?
Probably after about a half hour later from Brian Higgins arriving, John O'Keefe came into the waterfall with the defendant.
And that would have been probably about 11 o'clock, is that correct?
Yes.
And John O'Keefe, if you could tell the jury, well, first, did you know John O'Keefe?
So I knew John O'Keefe, but not well. I had only met him 2 times prior to that night. But I knew him to be a Boston cop, and I knew of him, and I knew some things about him.
Debbie, we don't need to know what each person drank.
And as far as the Boston Police Department, it's a fairly large department. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And about how many members or how many people are on Boston Police?
Depending on the year, I mean, sometimes it's upwards of 2,000.
And through the course of your work over the decades that you worked with the Boston Police, did you ever work with or have any professional sort of interaction with John?
No, I don't remember working with him directly within the Boston Police Department.
Were you aware of sort of what his role was or what he did within the Boston Police?
Yes, I knew where he worked.
And where did you
I believe he worked at the SORI unit, which is the sex offender registry unit.
And you mentioned just briefly before that you had heard of Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
Yes.
And what is it that you had heard?
Well, I knew him to be a friend of my sister-in-law, Jen, and her husband, Matt. I knew him to be a friend of my brother, Chris, and my sister-in-law, Julie. I knew him to be a friend of my brother, Kevin's. I've heard his name mentioned multiple times, and I knew that he had a horrible couple tragedies in his family, and I knew that he stepped up and decided to take care of his niece and his nephew when they tragically lost their parents.
And how would you sort of describe your relationship with John O'Keefe at this time, January 28, 2022?
Although I didn't know him well, I considered him to be a friend, and our relationship was very, very good, cordial, and I considered him to be somebody that I could hang out with and have a good time with.
Now, you mentioned that Mr. O'Keefe walked in around 11 o'clock to the waterfall with the defendant. For clarity purposes, you're referring to Karen Reed, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you see Ms. Reed in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Could you just identify as to where she's seated or an article of clothing she's wearing?
Sure. She's a female at the table in front of me with a black top on, long sleeve.
Just ask the record reflect identification. Identified.
Yes.
Now, with regard to Ms. Reed, had you met Ms. Reed prior to that date of January 28th?
I believe I had met her one time a week prior.
And do you recall any specifics about that meeting or how it is that you came to meet her about a week prior?
I do.
And if you could explain to the jury what those circumstances were.
Sure. I met her at the hillside. I believe she was there with John a week prior.
And as far as your interaction with her on that particular evening, anything significant stand out to you?
No.
Now, when they came in, and by they, I'm sorry, I mean Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed came into the waterfall, where did they go in relation to where you were sort of situated at the high top?
So I don't remember them actually walking in the front door. I remember them being in my general area at some point. And they went towards the other side of the table where my sister-in-law, Jen, and my brother-in-law, Matt, were standing.
Really quick here. Rob Ensign, thank you so much for the super chat. If they were all drinking, how is any of their testimony considered reliable? Well, someone can drink and not necessarily drink to excess to the extent that it impairs their perception and whatnot. There is that certain point that someone can have a drink or two, but it's when somebody gets like really drunk, obviously there's a gradient, obviously, but as you drink more, the more your perception and memory can become unreliable. There hasn't been anything so far in the testimony to suggest that literally anyone that was involved had been drinking to excess. There's been some suggestion of, a few beers plus a fireball shot. So maybe things could have gotten fuzzy. That's having to do with John O'Keefe, but there hasn't been anything about anybody else being like blitzed. So I don't know. So far we haven't heard anything about that. Maybe that changes as some testimony comes out about the number of drinks. I don't know. And there are some good questions here. Let me catch up on these questions here. Well, this is actually a comment from before the stream started. Bronwyn W. I find it interesting in the prosecution's case in chief, majority of us are leaning toward not guilty. That's not a good thing for the prosecution. Usually what happens is by the end of the prosecution's case in chief, you should be thinking like, why even bother with the defense? Right, like she's guilty. That's how it should be looking with all the evidence. That's why this is a massive disappointment for the prosecution at this point. Things might change. There's still time in their case in chief, I suppose, but really, it should be feeling swung more towards the prosecution at this point. Jerry Roth, my dad watches Legalbytes while he cross-stitched and told me I only stop for cross-examination. It's the only interesting part, not counting whenever Lita does commentary. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And you know what? The reason why I saved this actually is because Mr. Bites actually said something similar. I was like reviewing some of the testimony either last week or maybe earlier this week. And for one of the recaps and there was one point that I was kind of going over some of the direct examination again, and he was like, he's like, can you tell me when we get to the like the cool guys or something like that. It was something along those lines, like the cool guys are like the interesting guys, because he was just like, I don't like, this is so boring. I don't really care about this. The other stuff is like really exciting. He had the same sort of reaction. The Lucian Legalbytes, before lunch, Nicole stated on the stand she knows where the dog was rehomed, that she was in contact with the new owners to help the dog if needed. Yes, I know. And so that's why it was surprising to me that didn't get brought up again to sort of reestablish that connection during the cross-examination between her and the now custodian of the dog, to say you said that you were totally willing to help and all this other stuff, and you're in regular communication, and did you instruct them to communicate with you about if they got any requests from the prosecution? Did you give the defense the contact information for the custodian? Like that kind of thing. But she didn't quite flesh all of that out. I was a little bit surprised by that, but I don't know. Maybe this will come in through Brian Albert, because he also was the other owner of this dog. Jerry Roth, do you think the defense will try to rile Brian up? Definitely try to get him off balance, I think. And this is a very intimidating guy, I'm gonna say. Like just from now, like this guy has a very intimidating overall presentation. So it'll be interesting to see how this works out on cross-examination. Flash Fan 85, Legalbytes, he testified before? No, his brother Christopher testified yesterday. Jerry Roth, Legalbytes, why does it matter if he was in New York the day before? It does not. At least I don't think it does. Dionysia Duclos, Legalbytes, who do you think will cross Brian? Can't wait. I know I can't wait either. I think it's likely to be Alan Jackson. I think it is. Jerry Roth, why is it for some people it's you either do or do not remember? You can't say I believe, but others can say probably or I believe. What I noticed is that I think Judge Canone says that. She says, no, you can't say I, maybe not. It's you either remember or you don't, or you saw or you didn't, or there's no maybe, no probably, no I believe. She usually says that after there's been a couple of those that have come up. That's what I've noticed anyway. Maybe I've missed it and I'm getting the trend wrong. But that's what I've noticed. Also, Rebecca Anderson, Legalbytes, referencing dog location. I think there might be an issue that the judge wants to address outside the jury. Yeah, I mean that is what it sounds like. It could be that this was some kind of emotion in limine that they didn't want to be brought up in front of the jury because it's more prejudicial than probative, something along those lines. I'm not sure. So yeah. All right, let's continue on.
And at some point, driven with you back from New York?
No.
And what kind of vehicle was the one that he was driving back from New York, and what kind of vehicle was the one he was driving that night?
So the one back from New York, he was driving a full-size pickup truck. I'm not sure what make or model, but it had a cab on the back, and I believe it's gray. And then that night later in the night at the waterfall, he had a Jeep Wrangler vehicle that I believe is white, but I'm not 100%.
So he had arrived at your house before you, is that correct?
Yes.
And you said it looked like he had done something to the driveway?
He may have skimmed. He had a plow on his truck, and I think he may have plowed the driveway and then pulled out, and then we pulled in.
And as far as vehicles at your house, how many around this time in January 22, between yourself, your wife, kids, how many vehicles did you have?
I believe 3.
And what type of vehicles, and who was sort of the primary driver with regard to those?
So I had we had a Ford Explorer, a Cadillac SUV. It's a smaller SUV that my wife Nicole drives, and the Ford Edge that I already spoke of, and I believe we had one more vehicle that one of my kids drove at that time. And I'm just trying to remember. It might have been an Escape, maybe a Ford Escape. Someone could have had that at college. Someone could have had that at school. So I don't remember if it was there that night or not.
So all the vehicles were essentially like SUV type vehicles.
Yes, we didn't own any sedans or any cars.
Now, as far as when you pull into the driveway, the house at 34 Fairview has a two-car garage.
Yes.
And is the garage something that you or other members of your family would utilize as far as parking vehicles?
No. So unfortunately, we didn't use the garage a lot because we kind of used it for storage, and we had a lot of stuff out there. So we very seldom used it.
And if you recall, as you're pulling into the driveway, did you pull into the left side, the right side, or?
I believe I pulled in on the left side of the driveway.
And you mentioned that Mr. Higgins had sort of scooped with the plow like in the driveway and then parked on the street. Do you recall where in relation to your house or your driveway he parked?
So no, I don't remember where Brian Higgins parked. I remember him pulling out so I could pull in, and then I didn't really see where he parked.
And you then go into your house, is that correct?
Yes.
And are all of you, and by all of you, I mean yourself, your wife, your daughter, and Mr. Higgins all sort of coming in around the same time?
Basically, yes.
When you come into your house, do you recall how many doors in the front of the house are there?
So we have two front doors.
And one would be sort of by some steps, is that correct?
There's actually steps on both doors, but one of them is, I guess, considered the front door with a large set of steps.
And they would be sort of brick steps, is that right?
Yes.
And that leads into a foyer area of the house?
Yes.
And the other door, where does that lead?
So the other door opens up right into the we call it the family room, but right into the family room den area.
And do you recall specifically which door you utilized on that evening to go into the house?
I believe I went in the door on the right, which goes into the den. Not really sure what other doors people used.
And when you came into the house, who, if anyone, was present beyond the people that you would come in with?
So my son Brian was home. He had two friends, I believe, Julie and Sarah.
And these were people that you had known as friends of your son from prior vacation?
I didn't know Sarah. I had met Julie once or twice.
And as you were walking in, who, if anyone else, beyond your son and his two friends was there?
And my nephew Colin.
That'd be Colin Albert, is that correct?
Yes, Chris and Julie's son Colin.
About how old was Colin around then?
I believe he was just about 18. 17, 18. He's in high school.
So you're still in high school at the time?
Yes.
And when you walk in, where was Colin in relation to your son and the two girls that he was with?
He was just kind of standing in the kitchen with Brian and the two girls. Brian and the two girls were at the kitchen table, and Colin was just kind of standing there.
And from the time that you arrived home, how long was Colin at your house?
No more than 5 minutes.
And where did he go?
He left. He just said he was getting picked up.
We said he was getting picked up, and a few minutes later, he left your house.
Yes, I went and used the bathroom. I came out, and he was gone.
Now, at some point subsequent to that, who, if anyone else, arrived or showed up at your house?
After Colin left the house?
Yes.
Nobody else arrived at the house.
Your sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, at some point, did they come by?
Yes, I thought you were referring to after they showed up.
So my question is, do you know whether or not when Jennifer McCabe and Matthew McCabe arrived at your house, was Colin still there?
I don't know if he was still there or not. I believe he left before they came, but I'm not 100%.
So you come home and you go to use the restroom, is that correct?
Yes,
And when you go to use the restroom, Colin's there, correct?
yes,
And the McCabe's are not?
they are not.
When you come back from the restroom, Colin's not there?
Yes, Colin was gone.
And the McCabe's are there?
No, I don't believe they had arrived yet.
Okay. So they arrived sometime after Colin had left.
Yes.
And over the course of that evening of the 28th into the early morning of the 29th, did anybody else come into your house, or did anybody else come into your house at any point?
No.
Now, in addition to yourself, your wife, and your son, did you have any pets at that time?
Yeah, yes, we did.
Okay. And what kind of pet did you have?
We had a dog.
And what kind of dog was that?
So it was a German Shepherd mix.
And what was the name of the dog?
Chloe.
And how long had you and your family had the dog?
We had Chloe for approximately, at that time, maybe 6 or 7 years.
Do you recall how you got the dog or where you got the dog from?
The dog was from a shelter in Dallas, Texas, actually.
So essentially a rescue dog, is that correct?
Yes, rescue dog.
And when you got home after you went to the bathroom, what, if anything, did you do with reference to the dog?
At some point, I went upstairs to grab the dog and let her out back to use the bathroom.
And so when you would take the dog out, or when anybody would take the dog out to use the bathroom, how would that be accomplished? So what I'm asking is, would the dog be on a leash, or would it be let out in the yard? Or
No, so the backyard's fenced in, so I would open up the back door and she can go out, use the bathroom, and come back inside.
so in the entirety of your backyard, that's a fenced-in backyard, is that correct?
Yes.
And beyond that fence, as far as the abutting, what sort of abuts the back of your property?
So behind the back fence, there's a railroad track. I believe it's a commuter rail that's behind the fence.
And is there any sort of opening or way to open the back of that fence to get in sort of any wooded area between your house and the track?
Yes, there's a gate back there.
And the gate, as far as when you let the dog out in the back that night, did you stay with the dog while the dog was outside?
I stayed at the doorway, and the dog went to the bathroom and then ran right back in.
So about how long was the dog outside?
She was out back for maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
So went outside, went to the bathroom, came back in?
Yes.
And when the dog came back inside the house, where did the dog go?
So the dog kind of walked around in the kitchen for a few minutes, and then I took her upstairs.
And when you took her upstairs, where upstairs did you take her?
So the dog liked to sleep in our room, mine and my wife's room. So a lot of times she would go up there on her own. Sometimes I would walk her up, and I walked her up to our bedroom.
And at any point in time for the remainder of that evening or the early morning, did the dog go outside at all?
No.
And you mentioned that there are train tracks that run sort of close to your property, is that correct?
Yes.
And is that just the commuter rail, or does the Acela go by, or anything else?
I believe there is, in addition to the commuter rail, there's other trains that use that track, yes.
And how often, sort of on a daily basis, do trains go by your house on Fairview Road?
So it depends, I guess, schedule-wise, if it's the middle of the week or if it's the weekend. But, on any given day, they can go by 5 or 6 times, morning, more towards the rush hour times, morning, at night, and then sometimes at night and sometimes during the day. So really all day and night.
And when the trains go by, about how loud is that as far as from your house?
So it's loud, although having lived there for a period of time, I feel like at least I'm kind of immune to the sound. I don't really hear it as much anymore.
So something essentially based on how long you've lived there, you really don't even hear it anymore?
Not really, no.
Now, you let the dog out, you bring the dog back upstairs, and then where did you go from there?
So after I brought the dog up, I just came back down and hung out with everybody else.
And where within your house was everybody else sort of sitting?
So everybody was in the kitchen, and then we have a connecting dining room, but it's opened. It's only, a difference of 5 feet. And then we have the family room den that's adjacent to the kitchen. But they're all close proximity.
So the kitchen and the dining room are sort of the same room, is that correct?
Yes.
And as far as what if anything is between the kitchen and dining room and the living room that you were talking about?
So there's a wall, but there's a doorway. So there's really no barrier to go from the kitchen dining room into the family room.
So if somebody's standing in the family room and somebody's standing in the kitchen dining area, they can sort of see each other?
Yes.
Now, in the kitchen area where everybody was, or in the kitchen dining room area, do you recall sort of where people were and what they were doing around that time?
Yeah, I think people were just sitting around, having drinks. Someone had a speaker and they were listening to music and just talking and hanging out.
And as far as the sort of group and sort of the overall mood or demeanor of the group back at the house, how would you describe that?
Pleasant, fun. Everybody was having a good time. We were wishing Brian a happy birthday, and everything was going great.
And at any point in time, while this was all going on, did you, other than your situation with the dog, was there any point in time where you were not with the group in the kitchen dining area?
No, I was there basically for the whole night, except I think at one point I may have shown Brian Higgins some photos that were in my son's room that were upstairs.
And what kind of photos were we talking?
So my son Jack, who's one of the twins, was in the Marines, or is in the Marines, and we had put some plaques and some stuff in his room upstairs. And Brian Higgins was prior military, as am I, and I thought he would want to see the photos, so I had him look at them.
And that period of time that you were outside of sort of the kitchen dining room area looking at the photos with Mr. Higgins, about how long a period of time were we talking?
Very, very quickly, 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes.
Now, at some point over the course of that morning, things started to sort of wind down at your home. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And about what time was that things started to wind down and people started to leave?
I think Brian left at around 1:30. I believe he was the first to leave. And then others left after that.
When you say others left after that, after Mr. Higgins left your house, where did you go?
So after Brian left, I had gone upstairs and hung out and watched TV up in my bedroom.
Jerry, I haven't yet
One
fallen
day
asleep.
that day, is that fair to say?
Yes, I had the funeral in New York that morning. We had the long drive back, and we had been out, and now we're hanging out at my house, and it had been a long day. Yes.
And so at any point in time, after you went upstairs, after Mr. Higgins left, did you come back downstairs at all?
Yes, I think I popped back down at one point just to see kind of how long people were going to be there, and then went back up.
When you popped back down, how many people were still there?
I think Jen and Matt was still there, and the Brian's two friends were still there, and my daughter Caitlin.
Now, as far
Really quick here. This one is relatively recent in the testimony, so I wanted to bring it up. Lemon Lime, what would the dog being rehomed have to do with the case? So the defense is alleging that Chloe, the German Shepherd, has something to do with how John O'Keefe died. Those gashes that are up and down the right arm of John O'Keefe when he was found, they are alleging, I believe, that the dog is what did that there was some sort of a fight that happened. Chloe got animated, protective perhaps, and also attacked. I think that's what they are alleging. So this incident, being so close to Chloe being rehomed thereafter is interesting to in connection with that allegation. Okay.
far as beyond Mr. Higgins when he left, was there any other occasion that you can recall where somebody from your house went outside and then came back?
Yes.
And who was that?
So while we were hanging out, I believe the girl Julie Nagel's brother came to the house. I never saw him, but I could hear them saying that he was out front. And I think Julie Nagel had walked outside to talk to him.
And at some point after she walked outside, she came back inside. Is that correct?
Yes.
And about how long a period of time, if you know, was she outside?
I didn't really pay attention to how long it was. I don't think it was that long.
And as far as the outside of your house, after you had let Chloe out and back in, what, if any, observations did you make outside of your house? Did you look out? Did you see anything outside of the house?
Just that we have windows in the back of the kitchen area. You could just see that it was snowing.
Is that sort of like a bay window in the kitchen?
Yes, it's a large bay window in the kitchen.
When you look out the bay window in the kitchen, what part of your property does that face?
So it's the backyard. You can see the backyard. The bulkhead is right under that bay window, and you pretty much have a view of the whole backyard if it's in the daytime. But it was obviously a little dark.
Can you see the front of the house at any part of the front of the house when you're looking out the bay window?
No.
So at any point in time over the course of the evening, did you look out front to see anything out in front of your house?
No.
Now, at any point in time over the course of the evening, did you hear anything from front of the house, the back of the house, anywhere around the house that drew your attention outside?
No.
Now, at any point in time during the evening, did you know or did you become aware of either John O'Keefe or the defendant Karen Reed coming over to your house?
No.
And at no point in time over the course of that evening or the early morning there, did John O'Keefe or Karen Reed physically come into your house?
John O'Keefe and Karen Reed never entered my house.
And so you go up to bed, and the group is still sort of downstairs, is that correct?
Yes.
And at some point, your wife, Nicole, you share a bedroom with, does she come upstairs?
Yes.
And do you know about what time that was?
It was probably 2-ish. Not exactly sure, but around 2 or 2 o'clock.
And the doors to your house, as far as the front doors and the back doors, what is sort of the situation with regard to locking the doors before everybody goes to bed?
Can you rephrase that?
Sure. With when you lived at 34 Fairview Road, there were a number of doors to the house, including 2 doors in the front, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And how was that? Let me ask you this. Would it be unusual for the front doors of your house to remain unlocked overnight?
No.
Is that something that happened on occasion where people were supposed to lock the doors but didn't lock the doors?
Yes, from time to time, the doors, people would just forget to lock them, or we just didn't lock them.
And so your wife comes up to your bedroom about 2 a.m. or so. As far as you knew, was everybody else had left the house at that point?
Yes.
And you're up for a period of time with your wife, is that correct?
Yes.
And over the course of that time, so sort of following 2 o'clock in the morning, do you recall any sort of phone call or phone conversation with Mr. Higgins or anybody else?
No.
And at some point you fall asleep, do you recall about when that was?
I don't, but it was obviously after 2 because that's when she came upstairs, watched TV, and kind of hung out together for a while, and then went to sleep.
And the dog, Chloe, was she up in the room where you had brought her up before?
Yes.
She was there overnight, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, turning your attention to later on that morning or beginning of that morning, daytime morning of January 29th. Obviously, at some point you wake up, correct?
Yes.
And what is it that wakes you up on that morning?
I was awoken that morning to my sister-in-law, Jen, had burst into my room.
And do you know about what time that was?
It was early in the morning, between 6 and 6:30, I would say.
And fair to say that's not a normal occurrence.
No.
And when she burst into your room, can you describe her demeanor or sort of how she appeared when she first came?
She was very upset, almost hysterical.
And what, if anything, did she say when she came in?
She said something to the effect, John is dead.
Hearsay.
Next question, please, Sustained.
You know, one thing that kind of bugs me though about this description of Jen McCabe being hysterical, both Brian Albert testified to that just now, but also earlier Nicole Albert testified to that as well. All of the first responders, I mean, maybe it's just because in comparison to Karen, this is the case, but all the first responders said that Carrie Roberts and Jennifer McCabe were like pretty calm and like they could talk to them, you know, like they were not hysterical from what they described. Karen Reed, on the other hand, was like unable to string sentences together and was screaming, like the same things over and over again, like hysterical. So I don't know if, you know, maybe she walked in the house and broke down and, you know, because she was holding it together for Karen, perhaps that's one possibility, you know, or maybe just, you know, for these two people in comparison to nothing, she seemed hysterical to them. But maybe if they saw her next to Karen Reed, they would be like, okay, she's a bit more calm, but Karen's definitely hysterical. I don't know. But it's something that has been kind of bugging me at the back of my mind.
Did you know who she was referring to when she initially comes into your room?
I initially did not.
And at some point during the course of that conversation, does Ms. McCabe make reference to going downstairs?
Yes.
And prior to that, not the content of the conversation, but as far as the length of the conversation, about how long was that length of the conversation that occurred in your bedroom between yourself, Ms. McCabe, and your wife?
Probably a minute.
And the demeanor that you described as far as Ms. McCabe was concerned is almost hysterical. Was that continuous throughout that initial conversation?
Yes. She was very upset.
And who, if anyone, did she indicate was downstairs, or why did you go downstairs?
She said that the police.
This I'm going to allow with that foundation.
Sure.
She said that the police were downstairs.
And so you went downstairs to talk to them.
Yes.
And when you go downstairs, what do you see when you get to sort of the bottom of the stairs?
I saw a Canton police officer downstairs.
So inside your house at that point?
Yes.
And the door to your house, was it still open or shut or something?
I don't remember.
And the Canton police officer that's inside your home, did you recognize him?
Yes.
And who did you recognize him?
Last name Lank. So Officer Lank.
Was he someone that you were familiar with?
I knew who he was. Yes.
Did you socialize or friends or anything like that?
I didn't socialize with him. I knew him to be a Canton police officer. I had met him, you know, multiple times, and I knew him to know my brother Chris.
And so knew him is essentially what I'm asking, knew him in a professional capacity, personal capacity, or a little bit of both?
I would say more of a professional capacity, and I knew of him, but did not hang out with him socially.
And initially, when you first see Officer Lang, is he by himself, or who, if any, other officers are with him?
I believe initially he was by himself.
And another officer joined yourself and Officer Lang at some point?
Yes, I believe another officer came into the house.
You know who that officer is?
I don't.
And as far as them coming into your house, they were welcome in your house? You didn't say get out or close the door or anything like that?
No, of course they were welcome in my house.
And where did you go with the officer sort of in your house? Where did you spoke with the officer, I'm presuming?
Yes, we spoke in the kitchen area.
And when you're speaking with the officer in the kitchen area, who is there?
So my wife, Nicole, her sister, Jen, and I believe Jen's husband, Matt, arrived almost the same time that I came downstairs, maybe a minute after.
So that's kind of weird because Sergeant Lank testified that he was just in the foyer area, like just the very front of the house. Then Nicole testified that they were in like the dining room table area. And now Brian is testifying that they were in the kitchen area. It would be helpful to have a floor plan to be able to maybe distinguish all of these, and maybe there's some overlap between these. But it's weird that each one of these has said like a different space in the house, that they like sat for a minute and put a group interview together.
And how long a period of time was this conversation that occurred in the kitchen?
I don't remember the exact time. I wouldn't want to guess. I don't remember. He was 10, 15, 20 minutes maybe initially.
And when you say initially, was there a subsequent conversation that occurred after that?
Yes. The Officer Lank returned to the house sometime after that.
And when he returned sometime after that, was he alone or was there another officer?
I believe that time he was with Lieutenant Gallagher, perhaps.
And were you familiar with Lieutenant Gallagher prior to that morning?
I knew who Lieutenant Gallagher was on a professional level. I had not hung out with him on a social level.
And again, they were welcomed into your home and you spoke with them, is that correct?
Yes, the second time they were there, they were invited back to the house via a phone call.
And that second conversation within your house, where did that?
Same area, family room, kitchen area.
And if you know about how long a period of conversation was that second come back to the house?
That may have been longer, maybe a half hour.
Now, going back to sort of that initial conversation, as far as, so it's yourself, it's Mr. and Mrs. McCabe, your wife, and then the police, is that correct?
Myself, my wife, Nicole, my sister-in-law, Jen, her husband, Matt, had arrived, and the police, yes.
And in between that first speaking with the police and the second time that the police came back to your house, who, if anyone, did you call or notify in regard to the situation that was going on in front of you?
I called Brian Higgins
Why did you call Brian?
because I think it was important for him to know what was going on and that what had happened.
And as far as you knew with reference to Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed, what, if any, relationship, friendship, anything were you aware of between Mr. Higgins and either Mr. O'Keefe or Ms. Reed?
I was not aware too much about a relationship with Brian and either person. Brian had mentioned maybe even that night that he was friendly and knew John. I knew of no relationship between Brian and the defendant.
And following your conversation with Mr. Higgins, who, if anyone else, came over your house?
So Brian Higgins eventually came over to my house. And my sister-in-law, Julie, also arrived at my house.
And do you know why your sister-in-law, Julie, came by your house that day?
Yes.
And why was that?
So she has a routine that when it's someone's birthday, she likes to come by and bring like coffee and donuts. So it was Brian's birthday that night. So my sister-in-law, Julie, was coming by to drop off some donuts and coffee, I think.
And where was Julie when you first saw her that morning?
She was out front in the driveway.
And what, if anything, did you ask Julie to do when you saw her out in the driveway?
I asked her to come inside.
And when she came inside, is that when you informed her of what had happened?
Yes. I don't know if it was necessarily me that informed her, but people that were there were explaining to her what happened. It was a very, very chaotic, unbelievably chaotic morning.
And as far as when that was described to your sister-in-law, Julie, how would you describe sort of her demeanor or her reaction to the news regarding Mr. Oates?
Shock. That's how I would describe it. Everybody's reaction that morning was utter shock. And she was upset and looked very, very in shock.
And so the second time that the Canton police officers come back to your home, who was there at that point?
I know I was there for sure. My wife, Nicole, Jen, her husband, Matt, Brian Higgins may have been there at that time. And I'm not sure about Julie. Julie at one point left the house, and I think she came back later in the morning, but so I'm not sure if she was there.
And at some point when your sister-in-law, Julie, came back to your house, who, if anyone, came to your house with her?
Her husband, my brother Chris, who's her husband.
Was this before or after the second time that the police had been in?
I believe they came back after the second time, but I'm not 100% sure. The first time that Julie came with the coffee, the police were not there.
Now, when you first sort of get up and come downstairs and the police they're basically in your doorway, is that correct?
Yes.
Could you see outside as far as what was going on outside at that time?
Not from downstairs, but I had looked out the window after Jen had come up into my room and explained what had happened, and before I went downstairs.
When you looked out your window from your bedroom, what did you see?
I could see at least one police vehicle. I could see that there was something going on out front, and that was about it. And I just went straight downstairs.
At that time that you looked out your window, did you see either an ambulance or a fire truck out there?
I don't remember if I saw a ambulance. There were emergency vehicles out there, but I can't remember exactly which types.
It is a little strange. It is a little strange that both he and Nicole have now testified that they, that Jennifer McCabe busted in, woke them up, and that they said that they could see from their bedroom window the stuff that was going on, that they didn't go outside to like find out more, see if they'd help, do something. You know what I mean? Like that does seem strange. It does seem a little weird. John O'Rourke, thanks so much for the super chat. It seems like a stretch that over 3 EMTs and more firefighters heard Karen Reed allegedly say, "I hit him," and now it's blamed on a dog, possibly. Talk about something out of left field, IMO. This is a very weird case. It's a very weird case.
And
Pesky pirouette.
At that time or subsequent.
Also, why? What does BA keep looking at in his lap? I don't know. I don't know what he's looking at there. But there was a question earlier that let me address here. Also, what does he keep looking at? I think he was looking at like to the side. He's looking at the jury. I think that so a lot of police officers testify at some point in a trial. He was a police officer for a very long time. I would imagine that he probably has testified in a number of trials. Generally speaking, it's a good idea to be like talking to the jury while you are testifying to them, as long as you're not doing like listening for the question, answer, listening for the question, answer, because that's just a little bit too rehearsed, a little bit too, I guess, like theatrical and like and not authentic enough, or it's just it doesn't feel authentic oftentimes. So, but if you're just used to, addressing the jury when you are testifying, it's something that you kind of naturally pick up on. And that's something that I think that he's doing here just from his experience. Okay. And there's more questions there that I've saved. I'm going to, I'll answer them in a bit.
went throughout the course of the day. Did you go out to that area of your yard where you saw the cruisers and the sort of lights?
No.
And why?
I didn't see that there was a reason to go out to that area. The police had already been in my house. They had already talked to us about what was going on. It was a snowstorm at that point. They were trying to conduct an investigation, and I didn't want to interfere with it or have anything to do with it.
Now, as far as what you're learning, sort of when Jennifer McCabe first comes sort of verging in into your bedroom at 6 to 6:30 in the morning, at any point around there were you made aware of where John O'Keefe was at that point?
Yes.
And what were you made aware of?
I was made aware that he was taken to the hospital.
So by the time that you're awoken by Mrs. McCabe, John O'Keefe is, to your knowledge, not outside.
To my knowledge, I believed he was on the way to the hospital.
Now, later on in the course of that day, at some point, did you have occasion to speak with some troopers from the state police?
Yes.
And if you recall, who is it that you spoke with?
So I spoke with Trooper, last name Proctor, and then another trooper, and I don't know the last name, first name Yuri.
Would it be Sergeant Buchanan?
It could be.
And had you met either of those troopers prior to that date?
I had never met Trooper Proctor. I had met Trooper, I forget, what is the last name?
You met Trooper Yuri?
Yuri. I had met him once or twice before.
He wanted to say Trooper Buchanan, but he didn't want to say it wrong. At least he paused. He paused. Unlike that was what's her name? Not Nicole that said it this morning, but Julie Albert.
Was that in a professional capacity?
Yes.
And where did you speak with them on that?
At my sister-in-law Jen's house.
And if you recall, about what time of day was it that you spoke with them?
It was late morning, early afternoon, the day of the incident. So I don't know the exact time. Before noon, I think.
And why was it that later on that day that you were over your sister-in-law Jennifer McCabe?
Well, my sister-in-law Jen and her husband Matt were leaving my house. My sister-in-law was distraught. I wanted to be comforting to them and be there for them if they needed anything, and I drove to their house.
And this is, and speaking of your sister-in-law Jennifer, this is someone you've known since she was how old?
7 years old. She's like a little sister to me.
And at the point that you're going over to the house, did you know that there were going to be troopers from the state police over at the house?
Yes.
And fair to say they asked to talk to you, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you know who, if anyone else, they spoke to at your sister-in-law's house that day?
I believe they spoke with Jen, my sister-in-law Jen, and then her husband Matt, and then myself.
And so was that done sort of in a group setting, or was it separate or something else?
Separate.
And so they spoke to you in one area of the house while Jennifer and Matthew McCabe were in another area of the house, and vice versa for you?
Yes, I spoke with them at the dining room table, and Jen and Matt were not present. I believe they may have been upstairs or somewhere else in the house.
And if you know, where were you when the troopers were talking to either Jennifer McCabe or Matt?
So I was upstairs when they were being spoken to.
So I may have one moment, Joan.
Yes.
May I approach you?
Yes.
I'm going to show you a series of 8 photographs and ask you to review them and look up.
Sure.
So what I've just presented you what's been previously marked as exhibits 58 through 65, and generally speaking, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes.
And what do you recognize?
So the photos appear to be the front yard in front of my old house at 34 Fairview Road.
And from those photographs, they appear to be a fair and accurate portrayal of what your house and your yard looked like around that time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, with court's permission, I would ask to publish those for the jury to discuss with the witness briefly.
Hey, you can put them up, Ms. Gilman.
Ms. Gilman, if you could start with exhibit 58. Mr. Albert, sir, there should be on the desk in front of you a laser pointer. Actually, we already talked
I
about
have that, yes.
So what's up on the screen currently, do you recognize, is that what's depicted in exhibit 58?
Let's see. I have them out of order here. Just give me 1 sec.
Just because, thanks for the super chat. I live in a gated community. I wonder if there's an unwritten rule that emergency vehicles don't use sirens in that neighborhood similar to here. I only know to check for gossip if I see the lights. Oh, I think that it's very common during certain hours to especially if there are like local curfew hours where like, you're not necessarily curfew, but like, yeah, I guess it's a curfew, where there are definitely local restrictions in a lot of places where you can't have loud music past 10 p.m. or something like that. This could be one of those areas where that's the case. And so it could be that when emergency vehicles are operating during those time periods, that they don't have like the sirens blaring unless it's for some reason absolutely necessary. Because oftentimes those sirens and whatnot are like also to alert people on the road in advance to get out of the way so that they're not in the way of the emergency vehicles. They don't slow them down. But if it's 6 a.m. when there's no one on the road, especially because it's been snowing, that's one of those things that the sirens are maybe less necessary. Because no one's on the road anyway, so you don't necessarily need to alert people to get out of the way. But I've seen it. I've seen it happen where someone, some cop or something like that, puts their lights on without a siren at night. I think that usually is to not disturb people who are sleeping, especially if it's not, like I said, not really necessary.
So yes, this looks like the photo exhibit 58 that you handed me.
And this is a photograph of your house, or if I'm standing on the street to the left side of the property, correct?
Yes.
And on this sort of left side of your property, let me ask you this first. As far as between the roadway of Fairview Road and your front lawn, is there anything there as far as a sidewalk or anything like that?
No, there's no sidewalk. So the grass area goes right to the curb, and then there's the street.
And the curb that's in between the grass and the roadway, is that like a straight curb, a straight edge curb, granite curbing, or like rounded curbing? How would you describe that?
I would just describe it as a regular curbing. It's not granite. It's the color is black, so it seems like a tar curbing.
And in this area of the left side of your property, what if anything of note is sort of in that area of the property?
So in that area of the property, first of all, that's basically the property line from the neighbor's house. If you're staring at my house from the front, the neighbor to the left, that's the property line area. But there's a fire hydrant there. There is a flagpole with the American flag and the Marine Corps flag. And there is we call it like an electrical box, but I'm not sure what the purpose of it is.
And so for all the years that you've lived there, either as a child or as an adult, you really don't know what that electrical box does or what it is?
Yes, I don't know if it's operable. Sometimes the door is open. If it's windy, the door of the box blows open, and sometimes it's closed, and, we don't really have much to do with it.
And the general area where, when you looked out the window in your bedroom on the morning of the 29th, as far as where you saw the police vehicles or the cruisers, do you see that in this photograph?
Yes, that's the same general area.
So the same general area as you were describing with the fire hydrant, flagpole, things like that.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next exhibit 59. And again, sir, what's up on the screen? Is that what you have before you?
What was it, 59? Yes.
And from this photograph, sir, this is again a picture of your residence around the time of January 29th, correct?
Yes.
Fair to say this is taken after some of the snow has sort of melted from the storm before? If you can tell.
Yes, it appears that there's less snow in the front there.
So less snow than what you saw when you looked out your window or at some later point on the 29th.
Yes.
And from this photograph, if you could just direct the jury's attention to the driveway and the garages and sort of where is that located on?
So my driveway was this area right here, and that's the garage doors.
And from within this photograph as well, you mentioned that there were sort of two doors to the front of your house, one that leads into a foyer area and the other leads into a living room of some kind. If you could direct the jury's attention to where each of those doors would be on the house.
Sure. So the door right here we consider it the front door, and that goes into a foyer area. And then, not from this photo, you can't really see it, but there's a door in this, I guess, breezeway area, and that opens up into the family room.
And one last thing from this photograph, sir, if the window that you were looking out, see that window in this photograph as well, and can you draw the jury's attention to?
Yes, I believe it would be this one right here, in the corner.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next exhibit number 60.
You say 60?
60. And so what's up on the screen, do you recognize that as what you have before you as exhibit 60?
Yes.
And from this photograph, as far as the roadway and the sort of width of the road from the curb to the double yellow line there, is that generally what it was on January 29th? That's what the roadway looked like?
The morning of the 29th?
Well, the morning of the 29th, it was snowing, correct?
Right. So the roadway, I believe, would have had some snow on it.
So what I'm asking is, when you came home that evening or early morning of the 29th, is that essentially what the roadway looked like, absent whatever the snow was covering?
Yes.
The next photograph, Ms. Gilman. And again, now looking at what is exhibit 61, is that correct, sir?
1 second. Yes.
This is essentially a closer up image of the area of the fire hydrant and electrical box and the flagpole that you were talking about before.
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next photograph. And again, what's up on the screen, this would be, and I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Is this 62?
62. It appears to be, yes, 62.
So So you were mentioning earlier in your testimony that the area where you saw the police cruisers when you looked out your window in the morning of the 29th was near sort of where your property abuts the neighboring property, correct?
Yes.
And do you happen to know what number that next door neighbor's house is? Up or down from 34?
I honestly don't. I don't know what number that is.
And do you see sort of the property line in between your house and the next door neighbor's house?
Yes, I believe that row of trees is the property line.
So the row of evergreen trees there is sort of where it delineates between your property and the next door neighbor?
Yes, they appear to be in line from almost the street to the white fence.
And that white fence sort of in the back right of that photograph, is that the fence that you were talking about before that encloses your backyard?
Yes.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, number 63. Again, this is just another photograph of sort of that area of your yard, is that correct?
1 second. Sorry. Yes.
Now, with reference to this area of the yard at your house when you were living there at 34 Fairview Road, is that an area of the yard that would be of particular use, or did you go in that area of the yard all that much?
No, we didn't really use that area too often. There's a large wood chip bed. You can't see it because of the snow, but it kind of covers that area. So we don't really go over there that often.
And now, so with reference to this area of the yard, was there any sort of overhead, like ambient lighting, street lights, anything like that in that area?
No, so that's a very dark part of the yard. There's no street light there at all.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman, Mr. Albert, I believe this would be number 64, is that correct?
Yes.
And with reference to this, can you describe to the jury what are we looking at in this particular photograph? Exhibit 64?
So that's the front right door, I guess you could say, to the house. And again, you can't see the door, but it's inside that breezeway area to the left.
If you could, just using the laser point direct.
Oh, yeah.
What you're talking about.
So the door would be right in here.
And from the driveway leading up to that front door area you were talking about with the foyer once you get in, what if anything is sort of leading you up to the steps there?
To the other door,
To the other door, the front.
there's a brick walkway.
So brick walkway leading up the brick steps into the foyer area of your house.
Yes.
And the last in this set, Ms. Gilman, Mr. Albert, this would be number 65. Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph, sir?
Yes.
And what do you recognize?
So that's the picture of the ground in front of the fire hydrant, which is to the left front of my yard.
You can take that down. Thank you very much.
So that was right in front of the fire hydrant?
Now, Mr. Albert,
Mm,
the days that sort of followed from January 29th, as far as your home was concerned, was what, if any, sort of police presence did you observe or notice sort of in that area in the front yard of your home?
So over the course of the next couple of days, there were emergency vehicles and police personnel that day and days following in front of the house.
So later on in the afternoon of the 29th and continuing on for days after, is that correct?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you observe as far as the weather was concerned between the date of the 29th and the days that the police presence was outside of your house?
I believe it rained a few times during that time.
And as far as the snow that had been piled up on your front lawn, what, if anything, was occurring with the snow as the days went on following the 29th?
I believe so. Some of the snow was shoveled out, I believe, during the crime scene, and then some of the snow was just dissipating due to the fact that it was melting and it had rained a bunch of days.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to your house, and obviously at some point you moved from the house on Fairview in Canton to Norwood, correct?
Yes.
And when was that sort of first discussed between you and your wife as far as selling the house?
That was discussed in October, November of, it would have been 2021.
And what was it that sort of precipitated that discussion as far as selling the house?
Around that time, and it was post-COVID, the housing market seemed really good. And my brother, Chris, had sold his house, was in the process, and ultimately sold his house around that time. He got a great deal on it. I had known some other people that had sold around that time. And it was a little early for us because our children weren't all necessarily gone yet, but it was close, and we thought we could get a good deal for the house. So that's when we started exploring it.
And who, if anyone, did your brother Christopher put you in touch with?
So he put me in touch with a realtor that ultimately sold his house.
And at some point you sold the house?
I did.
And when was that?
So we didn't end up selling until April of
2023. And as far as prior to selling the house, what, if any, did the sale of your house have anything to do with what occurred there on January 29, 2022?
Absolutely not.
Just one moment now.
Yes.
Yeah, the last cross-examination did not go into like the sale, what it was listed for, what it sold for. So, and that was a little bit surprising to me. I thought that they were going to.
Nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
All right. Can I see counsel at sidebar for just a second, please?
Okay. Counsel at sidebar. While they do that, I'm going to answer some questions here. Anton Ivanov. So he attends the funeral of a New York cop, but not the cop found dead on his property. Did he not go to John O'Keefe's funeral? That's interesting to me. I would be curious as to why that is. But I haven't seen any testimony about it. Jerry Roth, can a judge overrule a jury? For instance, they say not guilty and the judge disagrees. Yes, but it has to be some pretty big circumstances for why they would take a decision away from a jury, because the judicial system really, really heavily favors jury decisions. Justin Perry, is it common for the prosecution's questioning of their own witnesses to not be interesting, or is it unique to this prosecutor? I wouldn't say it's necessarily unique to this prosecutor, but I would say, generally speaking, no. I mean, prosecutors want it to be interesting and good. I mean, I don't, look, I don't want to be dogpiling on him. I know we already have the what if any lally tally and all that other kind of stuff, but a good prosecutor is going to draw out testimony in a narrative way that is going to be interesting and engaging. So, it's not how we want it to be. And it's not how I've seen it to be in other cases with a prosecutor. Matt Genere, if it turns out that he had entered the Albert's house, is that grounds for perjury? Maybe. Perjury is really hard. The perjury is a really hard charge to pursue. Perry G, question, did no one have any direct interaction with the victim at the house? The witnesses for the prosecution are alleging that he did not go into the house, that they had all interacted with him at the Waterfall Bar and Grill, but then once the bar closed and folks went back to 34 Fairview Road, that was like the end of the night with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed for them and their series of events, according to their testimony. Defense says otherwise, of course. Baz 80's question. So just a thought, but if the family in the house knows the victim, I'm blanking on names, why did none of them come out? Have they tried to give a reason yet? Sorry, I missed a few days. No worries. No reason really given. In fact, two witnesses today have now testified that they woke up, were informed about it, looked outside and saw stuff going on, didn't go outside. On the one hand, I can understand from a police officer's perspective. They know that things can happen if, there's the refrain, don't talk to cops. They're probably very, very familiar with what can happen when you talk to cops when you shouldn't, when you get involved in a crime scene and you shouldn't. Sometimes it's best to just stay away. In fact, that's what we recommend for people, is if cops want to talk to you, and especially if you have any reason to believe that that there might be a particular reason
Thank
they
you, Your
might
Honor.
want to talk to you. Like something bad has happened. Generally speaking, don't talk to cops. Talk to a lawyer first. So anyway, so they may have been intimately aware of all of that and decided we're not going to get involved. Nick Wilson was asked her getting on with Mavi. We'll leave it at that. Sheena Ford, the witness aren't in court during testimony, right? But they can speak outside of court. So how do we know they aren't getting their story straight before the witness goes on? Before the next witness goes on? Well, yes. So they're not allowed to be in the courtroom for the testimony. They're not allowed to watch testimony online or anywhere else. The only way that we know is through basically trusting them. We really don't have a way of following up on whether or not they've talked about the case. Mike Olson, do you think Karen will testify? I guess you would advise her not to, but what could the pros and cons be if she does/doesn't? I mean, if the defense thinks that they really need her testimony at that point to win the case, then they could. It's a measure of risk versus reward, really. Is it worth the risk for her to potentially self-incriminate? Baz 80s. Question: if KR was found guilty, but then the investigation into the police finds incompetence or questionable policing, would it help or automatically trigger some kind of appeal? Potentially. And also that could have implications for other people who have been convicted of crimes in Canton, prior to this, especially over the last couple of years. Jerry Roth, has the judge ever said no to may I have a minute or approach? Maybe not may I have a minute, but may I approach sometimes. Yeah, I'm sure. Because, sometimes an attorney is kind of, they're like drowning in some sort of direct cross-examination, and they want to try to introduce something, and the judge knows what it is that they're trying to introduce. They want to, put something in front of the witness, and the judge is like, okay, hang on, stop. Like, let's see you at a sidebar. Don't do what you're trying to do right now. There could be circumstances like that where a judge basically prevents an attorney from approaching the witness. Dionysia Jaclo, can you reply again to the question that if lawyers can share the evidence with the witnesses in order to prepare them not to perjure? I can't find it from yesterday. Yeah, no worries. Oh, you guys, she's dreaming. That's really cute. Hang on. She's totally dreaming. Oh, so cute. So lawyers are not able to feed information to a witness in preparation for their testimony. They're not allowed. That's called coaching the witness. So they can talk to them about what to expect, what they might be asked about, what maybe what they plan to go over, what they anticipate the other side to go over. That kind of thing can happen. But they can't give them information to be now remember this. So and so is going to testify to that. That kind of thing is not allowed. Justin Perry, what's the workload for these attorneys? Are they working every day through the weekend on this case? Yes. During trial attorneys have no life but that trial, generally speaking. It's like they are there probably hours before trial for the day actually begins. And then, during lunches, like during lunches, they might have a little bit of a break, but oftentimes working through lunch. After court ends, they might be requesting transcripts, for the day so that they can review, go over stuff that needs to be gone over. Do they need to call, another witness for a rebuttal or something like that? What do they need to prepare for cross-examination? Have they hit their mark with various witnesses in order to did I say cross-examination? I meant closing arguments. Have they hit their marks for what they need to get out in front of a jury in order to be able to make an argument on closing in their closing arguments? Because at the end of the day, closing arguments are like where everything comes together. But in order to be able to argue something at closing, you have to have drawn that evidence out during the trial. So it's like they have certain things that they always want to go over with particular witnesses, which is why I said earlier that sometimes you'll have witnesses that are on both sides witness lists, regardless of whether they're friendly to that side or not, because they have stuff that they need to get out in order to be able to make an argument at closing. So yeah. So like all of that stuff, like there's so much that they're doing that like even on the weekends, they generally are working also. They may or may not see their families during this trial. Probably not. Pesky Pirouette. Alita could have a heart condition and be checking some sort of monitor he has in his lap to make certain he is within certain tolerances. Maybe. I doubt that he would be allowed to have a monitor of any kind on his lap. That would be weird. That would be weird. It would be a little suspicious. Jerry Roth, think we get crossed today? Perhaps. Maybe we're about to get it. I don't know. Yeah, Jim Mergel, same question. Dionysia Jaclo. So far, when everyone left the house, did they say from which way they did? Maybe they didn't see him because he was in the other way. Devil's advocate. Yeah, we don't know. All we've heard, the only witness that we've heard from before Brian as to like about what was going on inside the house at 34 Fairview Road after the Waterfall Bar and Grill is Nicole Albert. So and she's just like, people just left. I didn't know which way they went. They left. We live here. And I imagine that Brian's probably going to say something similar or at least, he did talk about one point when people were leaving, but it's like, yeah, they haven't testified to which direction. But I imagine we'll be hearing from those individuals as well. And they'll probably be able to give us more detail as to which way they went, where they parked, all that kind of thing. John O'Rourke, thanks so much for the super chat. Indy, Holmes, and Mav need a P.O. box for treats and presents. Just saying. Yes, folks have talked to me about a P.O. box, and that's something that is on my list that I need to get going. Something with a forwarding address to where we're at. Sandy, thank you so much for the super chat. Please don't forget to hit like. Thank you so much. And yes, if you guys are enjoying the stream, please do hit the like button. It really does help us. It's like, it's a, minimal effort, but you have no idea how much it actually does, in fact, mean. All right, let's get going with the testimony.
All right, so Joyce, rather than start cross-examination of Mr. Albert, we're going to let you break for the day. And I did want to give you some scheduling updates because there have been...
I'm going to pause real quick. Joshua Frost, that was very timely of you. I was about to be like, no, we're probably going to jump into cross-examination, but no, I guess they are done for the day.
Questions from you folks and requests. So next week will be a full week with him, every day next week. Again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday will be full days. I'd like us to pick up the pace a little bit here. No repetitive testimony so that we can move things along.
That's on you, prosecution.
We are moving things along. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday will be full days. Tuesdays and Thursday next week will be half days. The week.
Okay, so next week you heard her, or did you hear her? Monday, Wednesday, Friday are full court days. Tuesday, Thursday, half days. So Friday. I really hope this isn't the case for every Friday because I'm supposed to be flying one of these Fridays. Actually, a couple Fridays I'll be flying. So hopefully this isn't an every week kind of thing. But next week we are Monday through Friday.
I wanted to address with you where we were already going to be off the 29th and 31st of that week. There's been a request and it makes sense. We will now take
Wait,
29th,
sorry.
30th, and 31st.
Let me-
We will now first of that week, already going to be off the 20,
Okay.
where next week will be.
Sorry, going back.
holidays. The week I wanted to address with you, where we were already going to be off the 29th and 31st of that week. There's been a request and it makes sense. We will now take the 29th, 30th, and 31st off, rather than have you folks come in. So you'll get 3 full days, sort of maybe in the middle of this trial, to be able to just
Okay.
kind of regroup. And I figured everybody would welcome those days, but I am going to ask you to give us a full day on the 28th. So think about that this weekend. So the Tuesday will be a full day, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you'll be down.
Okay. That's good to know.
June 7th, we're off. We will end June 6th at noon instead of 1 o'clock. Okay. All right. So I do have to give
But the 27th is also Memorial Day. So that's going to be one trial day that week, it sounds like.
you those 3 cautions. Please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, and read anything about this case, please disregard it. I always like to tell jurors, just leave everything here. Your notebooks, literally, figuratively, just leave it here. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday morning.
Rise for the jury.
Well, that's not the Friday that I wanted. But okay. All right. So at least we have some advance notice on some of the scheduling.
Here we go. Thank you.
In session. Any other evidentiary issues I should be prepared to spend some time on this weekend?
Not for the Commonwealth, no.
We can wait on that.
I heard you say we can wait on that, but I'd like to know, is there anything that I should be taking a look
Right,
at?
no, I wasn't, I was talking about something different. I think with regard to Brian Albert, there's really nothing other than I wanted to talk to my co-counsel over the weekend to get the court to potentially revisit the ruling that you just made, which whether you do or you don't, Your Honor, I think you've heard, we can hear more potentially. But with regard to Caitlin Albert, Your Honor, there is the issue of the
photos.
photos between her and Katie McLaughlin. I just wanted to flag that for the court. I think we've addressed that already, and I think the court had said we'd take them on a photo by photo basis.
No, what I said is you need to approach. So
Yeah.
before she testifies, let me know where we stand.
Will do.
Okay? Or before your cross-examination.
Will do.
Interesting.
Do we expect to hear from her next week?
Yes,
Okay.
I think probably Monday.
probably Monday.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Thank
No,
you.
Your Honor, thank you.
All right. Okay. So that's it then. So that's it for the day. We ended with direct examination, and I guess we'll pick up with cross-examination of Brian Albert on Monday morning. And we've got a 5-day trial week next week. Good to know in advance, honestly, especially for my purposes, because I like to try to pre-schedule these live streams. There's a bit of like admin work that goes into this kind of stuff with thumbnails and descriptions and all that kind of stuff. So it's like I like being able to know which days are full days and half days and non-days. So tomorrow there will be a members only by club stream at 10 a.m. East Coast time. Same thing will be the following. Let me double check before I say anything. I think the following Saturday there should be. I might also be flying next Saturday. I'm going to be going to a number of places. So but all this next week I'm in the office and we are we are going through this trial. So, all right. Let's see here. Some questions. Debbie Faison Cook, how do they decide which attorneys questions which witnesses? Do younger, newer attorneys come up with their own questions, or do the more experienced attorneys tell them what to ask? Well, in my experience, from what I've both observed of other people's trials and also prepared for trial myself, um, the lead attorney, who's usually like the partner of the firm or something like that, is typically going to take on like most of it. I mean, most of it, a larger portion of it, and particularly the more difficult people to direct and cross-examine, like the more important witnesses, so to speak. Someone who is like one of the more junior attorneys is probably going to take someone that is a little bit less crucial to the case, but according to their experience level. It really depends on, how many trials has this attorney done before? What's, how have they proven themselves in the past? Have they been working on their craft? That kind of thing. If someone's like completely unproven, they might be given like one portion, like one witness to direct or cross-examine. And it depends on the style of the attorney, or the firm, but especially if there is a new unproven attorney who like this is their first trial, probably they'll have more oversight with their questions that they come up with also, and they'll assign them, in my experience, they'll assign them they'll assign them the witness and then say like, hey, like a week in advance or something like that, I want you to write up the questions that you want to ask on direct examination or on cross-examination. Give them to me. I'll look over it, see if there's anything missing. It's very similar to like drafting motions or drafting any kind of pleadings, or drafting really much of anything. And having one of the more senior attorneys kind of look over it, make sure that it's good to go. And it's not missing anything that's really important. So like that's the kind of thing that'll happen to especially to give a more junior attorney the ability to gain experience. Sandy, so she will make a decision right before testimony. That is unusual to me. Legalbytes, isn't that odd? Well, sometimes judges will kick the can down the road as far as they possibly can on a particular decision because they just want to buy themselves more time to sort of think about it. She might think about it over the weekend and kind of make up her mind more or less. And then, be ready by that point to give an answer. Or there might be something that contextually it depends on, what kind of questions come up, what kind of answers come up from the witness. So we'll see. I mean, it's not that crazy to me that what she said in that last portion. Jerry Roth, again, she interrupts before the defense can cross-examine. I do not like this. For me, I would rather have this where they have, they allow for the full direct examination. And then rather than, going 45 minutes into what might be a 2-hour long cross-examination and interrupting in the middle of the cross-examination, I would rather cut it off early before you make that transition. That way the entire cross-examination can be done on a different day. I would much rather have it this way than the other way. All right. Did I get all of the questions from before? Yes, I did. All right. So, okay. Ooh, poll. I forgot to end the poll in the morning stream. I'm so sorry, guys. But we have 806 votes on this one. Love it. And which way are you leaning for Karen Reed's guilt for murder? 74% now say not guilty. 22% say need more information. 3% say guilty. I love the fact that we still have folks that are differing in opinions. It's not that I want to have that like inorganically happen, but I like the fact that folks are thinking about it and hopefully not feeling intimidated to go to one side or another. And just, you know, natural. What are you doing? Sorry, Mavi's on the floor here and she's playing with something that might be my chapstick or eyeliner or some pen or something. She tends to do that. But I love the fact that folks are you know, coming to their own conclusions and in their own time. I love it. I love it. Love to see it. Okay, folks. Thank you once again for joining me throughout this trial. This has been absolutely wild. We've had another installation of the Boston Tea Party trial, also known as the Karen Reed murder trial. And I appreciate you guys joining me on this crazy ride. So thank you so much for watching, whether that's been on live or on replay, and for engaging in the chat and in the comments or just lurking. I appreciate all of the folks that are buying memberships for themselves and for others. It's a pen. She's got a pen. You know, folks that are buying memberships for themselves and for others, folks that are super chatting, sending super stickers. Thanks, of course, once again to the mods for helping to make sure that dialogue is you know, robust. Folks are bringing in their different opinions, coming from their different perspectives, but doing so in a way that helps us to, you know, ensure that everyone feels comfortable to bring their differing opinions, and in a way that is helpful for everybody to get to the truth with a capital T. And oh my goodness, just before we close it out, just because, thank you so much for gifting 10 more Legalbytes memberships. That is so kind and generous of you once again. So Brittany Paris, Doge Bowl, Nishay Jones, Tyler Graff, Lauren B, Joe Beer, Sandy F, Ann P, Charlotte Magua. You have all been gifted memberships by Just Because. So welcome, or welcome back to Bite Club. Very happy to have you guys here tomorrow at 10 a.m. East Coast time. We will be having our next members only live stream. So very casual kind of hangout over a live stream, chatting with the chat over all kinds of stuff. We talk about law, we talk about food, we talk about all kinds of stuff. So I very much hope to see you guys there as well. And otherwise, I think that is about it. This has been quite a week. So thank you once again for joining me, and I'll see you guys in the next video.